muscle imbalances are normal. They are common. I don't know a single person without an imbalance. But
of course.
again,
I mean, we accept it in every other aspect of our life, right? We accept that we have a dominant side. We accept that, some things that we do are stronger. We have stronger aspects of everything else we do, stronger aspects of our personality, like our muscles, like we have strong, like we're always thriving to have some balance and notice these things, but you're going to be stronger in some ways. That doesn't mean that everything needs to stop, but it does mean that we look at those things and we work to bring them closer together. Hey guys, and welcome back to the Thick Thighs Save Lives podcast. I'm Kelsey.
Hey guys, I'm Rachel. We have a really, really super crazy good episode for you today. Super crazy good. It's crazy good because it's got knowledge bombs. I love me some knowledge bombs.
I do love me some knowledge bombs, and I really like to talk about some of those things where when we find out about them, we're like, of course. Of course, that's what's been happening, but how do I fix it? So we are going to kind of jump right in and talk about some muscle imbalances today.
Well, wait, because before we talk about muscle imbalances, and this episode is going to be full of knowledge bombs, but one knowledge bomb for you, because I know that you might not know this yet. I have some bad news.
Oh, bother. What's your bad news?
I sent my son to school yesterday. It was St. Patrick's Day.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that St. Patrick's Day had been adjusted. I had no idea. I thought this is my impression of St. Patrick's Day. St. Patrick's Day is a day where, as far as I understand it, being not a person from Ireland. Wait, is that maybe it's not even Ireland. I think that's like a common misconception. I'm ignorant. All I know is it's a drinking holiday. That's all I understand about it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, yesterday, my son comes home from preschool and is telling me about that there was leprechaun footprints in his classroom. There was green glitter in the toilet. There was
green glitter in the toilet?
There was traps in green glitter in the toilet. I said that. There was traps in games, and he ends it with, and I was the only one not in a costume, Mama.
No, he didn't even say that.
Okay, you can ask Mark. He did say that.
Come on, Roar.
And I said, excuse me? People were in costumes? It's St. Patrick's Day. Like, I didn't even send him in green. And he was like, well, Delaney had a green braid. And I was like, damn it, Delaney. I said, well, you know what? Just get used to it because she's your class president, okay? Everybody knows that. I knew that from the first moment I laid eyes on her. I was like, that girl's going to be the class president, okay? So just get used to bowing down to her now. Of course she had a green braid, okay? Your mother is not on top of things. However, what I learned yesterday, and this is very bad news for all of us regular people, is that the children have now stolen St. Patrick's Day away from us. We are no longer just going to wait until they go to bed and have some alcohol because it's our holiday. No, now we need to set traps for leprechauns. We need to make footprint. Now they've stolen this away from us. I feel it was the last thing we had.
You know, I didn't think about it that way until you said that. But I guess as a parent, you realize that it's now stolen. I was talking to Jess about it yesterday and just feeling like another thing. Come on. She was like, I didn't know that the leprechaun had to come out and leave treats and presents and stuff. And kind of like the Easter bunny, like the Irish Easter bunny. And I was like, wait, this is a thing? I definitely, but like parents had another thing to first we have the elf on the shelf. The elf's got to move all the time. It's super creepy. Now the Easter, but the Easter bunny's got to have the footprints and stuff like that. Santa Claus, there are several of these a year. We're going to add the leprechaun. I mean, the leprechaun honestly makes the most sense because he's a fun, jolly little fellow who has coins and stuff. It actually actually does make sense. To me, it makes more sense than a bunny sneaking into your house during the
I don't
night.
know. I think that, I don't know.
Like
Maybe it's
all
just
of
too
these are
many.
break-ins.
They're all break-ins. Number one, we're all just we're working off of this is the only time where it's okay and fun for someone to break into your house. Like I'm not sure where we stand on that, but I still, and this may be too many horror movies, but I still feel like a leprechaun, hard no. A bunny, okay. A jolly man, I'm definitely feeling weird about that. But a leprechaun, keep that shit out of
Yeah.
my house. And I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to say never, because the minute you say that as a parent, you just eat those words right down. You eat them right down and they taste horrible. But I would like to say that I do not want to succumb to this. Now I have to draw leprechaun footprints and make a green toilet and do all of these ridiculous things, because you know what? I'm tired.
You
I'm
know,
tired.
yeah.
And I don't want to do it. And I feel like we had one thing. We had one thing where we were like, this is a drinking holiday. This is for
Yeah.
adults. This is our
It's green
thing.
beer, no green toilets.
Unless you're puking in them.
Unless you're
You're
puking in
puking your
them.
green beer. That's the only time you have a green toilet. And then now they're coming for it. And I just feel like, no. I just feel like, no, get your hands off my last holiday. No, I'm not going to. I say I can't say it because I'm just going to then, like, in a couple years, I'm going to be like, I've been set in that trap. And people are going to be
Yeah.
like, you said never. But I don't know.
Well, you can say, honestly, I'm not going to hold you to it, because I just want to say people change their mind.
And
Like,
that's okay.
and that's okay. There's many times that I've changed my mind in my life, and then people are like, but you said this thing. And it's like, okay, well, I changed my mind since then. Like,
Okay.
I don't remember who that person was, but she was last week. She was this morning. I don't know who
Whoever
she
I woke
was.
up as last Tuesday is not
I don't know her anymore. So we're just gonna forget about that.
irrelevant.
Said I loved him. Oh, who is he?
Erroneous.
Erroneous.
You don't often get to use that. So when you do, we always go for it.
Capitalize on it.
Erroneous.
I feel that way. Yeah, no, you can decide as you go. There was a thought that came into my mind, and now it like immediately left, and I was like, oh, say that thing, and now it's gone forever. So there's that. Oh, I wanted superstitious. So you kind of like alluded to this, and this was a part of a conversation that I was having earlier this week. So I just wanted to throw it out there because it actually came from your PR clips that are in the gym. So do you have something that you feel like you are superstitious about in your life? Like, it doesn't even have to be current. Is there something that you've had, like an item that you've had that you've been, or even just like something in your life where like this one person says this, like, it's going to be a great day, and then it's always a bad day? Like, is there anything you are superstitious about?
Well, you already know mine because you're basing this whole thing off of mine, but I will say it for the people. I am so, if you want a scale on 1 to 10 of how extra I am, this is it. I had a specific clip, like if you use barbell in bumpers, like there's clips that go on the end of the bar to keep the weights on.
Bar
I
clips.
had a
Yeah.
specific clip. Now there was all light clips, and then there was like kind of one different one because our gym was a hodgepodge and it was kind of like all used equipment, and who knows where this clip came from? No one knows. But it was like this one clip, and I had to have that clip. And people didn't know this. So people would go in the bucket. And first of all, what's the matter with you if you're having non-matching clips? Like, do you even care about your life at all?
Yeah, maybe that's not what people are choosing to give their fucks about, because you only have a
I'm
certain
just
amount of
saying,
fucks to go during the day.
you can't have non-matching clips. But sometimes the clip would be gone.
Yes.
And I'd be like, well, I'm going home. Never mind. And
No,
that
what you would actually do is scream "clip" in the middle of the gym. If you guys have seen Hocus Pocus when she calls out to the book to come, that's what Rachel did with the clips.
I called for the clip, and it came flying over and went on my bar. And that is what I attribute all my PRs to. That clip
Yeah.
that's my
So super
success.
success in a good way. She was
Any
succeeding
success I ever had.
in a good way. So like for example with this same idea is so this clip became like known and whatever. And then one year for Rachel's birthday, one of our friends got her a set of clips that had some written note on it. It says like PR and like on the clips. And they're now in the gym. And Isley refuses to use those clips. She
She
will
won't
not
use my
use them. She will
clip?
not lift the bar if those clips are on the bar. It's the weirdest thing. Like I've grabbed them and went to put them on the bar, and she's like, "We can't use those clips."
Yeah, but they're the
And
best clips. They're
yeah,
the
I
best
was like,
ones.
Isley, these are PR clips. They say it right on there, and she's like, "No, that's gonna jinx me. That's somebody else's PR." And I'm like,
Oh, because those are
What?
they have my juju.
They got
It's
juju.
my PR juju and it's not hers, so she can't.
She won't use them. She
Okay.
refuses to use these clips. And I've been like, you're so weird about that. But okay, like I'll change out the clips. And she was like, well, she's like, you haven't had something like that in your life. And then I was thinking back to it, and I did have this dress that every time I wore it, something bad happened. And then I just
Wait,
ended up having to throw out this dress, and I loved it.
wait, you've worn a dress more than once?
Exactly.
Okay. Okay. This story seems very
This is
unbelievable.
many years ago.
Was this in
And
high school?
I was in it, and like, you know, like it had bad juju on it. And every time it was hanging in the closet, I'd be like, maybe I should wear that dress. And then I would be like, no, you know what's
You
gonna
know
happen? You're
what's
gonna
so
end up in a ditch
you?
if you wear that dress.
You know what's so you? The fact that you would know that the dress had bad juju, you would be like, I'm going to avoid that dress. Every time I wear that dress, something bad happens.
Yeah.
But that you would still keep it in your closet.
Yes. And every
That's
time
so
I
you.
looked, it's so stupid too, because every time I would just like look at it and be like, oh, that's a cute dress. Can't wear it though.
That's there's your hoarder tendencies coming through right nicely right there. So I'll just say, I have to come back to, listen,
Hmm.
even though Delaney is going to be the class president and stuff, I
Yeah.
just want to say this real quick. My son walked into daycare today singing Savage Love when somebody break your heart. And like, so I don't know. I'm doing fine. I feel like I'm doing fine. Sis, you doing a
Better
good
than
job. Sis, you
better
doing
than
a
woman
good job.
by Kesha. I'm a motherfucking woman.
I mean, listen,
Actually, that made my day when he started singing that. I'm not gonna lie.
I don't change my music for like when he's in the car. Like I just
No,
yeah. So
no.
you might hear Savage Love and then go sing it at daycare and it might be wildly inappropriate. I don't know. But listen, I'm just here to do the thing. And okay, so let's
Muscles?
get to the muscles because
Okay.
I feel like I really do feel like when I learned this information, it changed everything about the way that I treated my body when I had an injury and or like a twinge or like a ouch that is bothering me. And I really just want everybody to have the same experience where they have the knowledge to like actually be able to address when something is like hurting or giving you nagging pain.
Can I say something about injury before we dive into that? Um, and I'm pretty sure I've said this in a previous podcast, but when we think about and talk about injury, first of all, there are several things that lead up to an injury, and every time that happens, you know, like we're training, and then all of a sudden we're injured. Unless it's some kind of a like freak accident, there are several warning signs before injury actually happens that leads up to that. So it's like the shot of tequila, right? We can have 15 beers, one shot of tequila, we're sick, we blame the tequila. So that's exactly what happens with training. You'll have, you know, several things where your movement patterns are off, you have some imbalances, and then you do one squat, you end up injuring yourself, and we're going to blame the squats.
You
When
can
in
have 15
fact,
beers?
you know,
My God.
Well, when you're gonna end up getting sick, I wasn't gonna go with like 5 or 6.
Oh, I'd be puking in the toilet. 5 beers, I'm going to be puking in the toilet.
Green
But
beer is 5 or 6.
yeah.
But we really have to look at the things that are leading up to that one incident where we end up with an injury. And that's when we start to talk about muscle imbalances and where we have some dominant muscle groups.
Yeah, and I think it's so good, and I love that analogy every time you use it, because I do feel like it really speaks to people about the fact that, like, you had some warning signs,
You
okay?
100%, and I'm totally guilty of this too. I will know before, my shoulder starts hurting, before my knee starts hurting, like dude, I know. I know what's happened. I know what I haven't been doing for prehab, rehab stuff. And like when I really think about it and have an honest conversation with myself and say, like, are you stretching at night? Are you doing all of these preventative things that are in work? Did you have any warning signs before, you had to stop doing some of those movements? Yeah, 100% you did.
Did you trip on the way to the bathroom and then have like a totally drunk conversation with the girl in the next stall? Yes, you did. Did you get another beer anyways? Yes, you did. Now
Yes,
we
you
need to
did.
talk about that.
Yeah.
So here is, your warning signs. And naturally, we know this now about muscles, but I didn't always know this. And I think that I can definitely attribute it to my work with a sports massage therapist. And this whole entire episode, I'm not going to say masseuse, because if you've listened to the previous episodes, I have now been corrected and I've learned. So I have a massage therapist.
Mm-hmm.
So
Very different occupations.
when you really actually listen and pick your massage therapist's brain, there is some unbelievably valuable information in there, in that when you go in and you're like, I have this like pinch in my shoulder blade, like it's killing me, whatever. And the very first thing she says is lie on your back. I'm like, lie on my
But
back.
how are you going to get to my shoulder blade?
You ain't hear me? I said, I have a pinch in my shoulder blade. And she starts aggressively going after my pec. And I'm confused until 1 second later when I'm like, oh, ow, ow. And then I understand that the pain where I was feeling it wasn't actually the root cause of the issue. And so I started talking to her about like, hey, how come every time I come in with like, and I tell you where the pain signal is, why is it that you're always going somewhere else? And she's like, well, muscles work in opposite. So like muscles work in groupings, right? And she's just explaining this in a really like simplistic, like layman type of way, because I'm, me. I'm not a specialist in the area. But the way that muscles work in groups is that there is, a muscle that does the pushing and a muscle that does the pulling, and they work together, right? So when you have pain in one, it's often because there's a knot, or the other one is pulling too hard on it, and it's making it out of alignment, or I don't know, I'm not a massage therapist.
Yes.
But it's pulling it out of line. And that is where,
Well, when you think of it's shortening it. So
it's shortening it.
when you have one side of a muscle group that is completely shortened, you're overstretching the other side. So when you continue to shorten, so like there are knots in your muscle, when you continue to shorten that muscle group, the other one is just overworked, right? Because like we're not actually going to the other side and stretching out that muscle, so then they can work together in a balanced way.
I love that we both went to this right away with our hands. We get to do this. I'm going to show you. So
There's a lot of hand motions. Also, if you don't know about our podcast being on YouTube, you got to go watch it, because you can really keep up to date on all of these hand motions, and the explanation is way better on YouTube. Think That Stabilized podcast.
So no muscle ever works singularly. And I think that information really changed both the way that I worked out and the way I thought about those little twinges and injuries and whatever, because whenever I was thinking about my muscles, I was always thinking of them as singular things. And that was the way I was working them. Like I was isolating them in the gym. I'm going to isolate this one muscle and I'm going to grow it. It's like, okay, but that muscle doesn't work correctly without the other one that works with it. So that was like a big reason why I stopped individualizing my muscle work, because the knowledge that it's actually a grouping and working one without the other isn't really like a good idea when it comes to imbalances.
So here's the thing though, with your brain wants to do this thing where we put everything into a vacuum, and we would like to look at an isolated incident or just a muscle group that's hurting. And everybody knows that when you have, something like an injury or just like a nagging pain, which isn't necessarily an injury yet, it's just kind of like a little bit of a nagging pain, we want to address that right away. We want to address, where do I feel the pain? So you start digging in, maybe where you are feeling that pain, as if it's working in a vacuum. And everything basically that we talked about, as far as like when it goes to nutrition, fitness, your life, nothing else is working in a vacuum. So when we think about our bodies, the fact that we're going to put it in a vacuum, when it won't work like that at all. Just like, your interactions throughout the day aren't working in a vacuum. I can come into the office, have an interaction with Rachel, but how the rest of my morning went before that interaction is going to affect that next interaction, right? Like, we are never working in a vacuum, because as humans, we are just complex individuals, and there's a lot going on with us, but our brain doesn't like that information. It wants to look at one thing and say like, oh, okay, this is in pain, this is a nagging injury, maybe I should just work that. Not the case.
Not the case. And it really is just a lack of information, that it's just breaking it down too simplistically. And I think that's often what we do when it comes to trying to learn about our body. It's so complex and there's so many things that we generally can't wrap our head around unless we're a specialist in that area. So it's like, well, I want to know about it because it's mine. But I'm really just too like simple to really understand it fully. And that's why I think these little knowledge bombs can really help in, addressing some of these things that when we have these nagging things. So I want to talk about nagging things for a second, because obviously you have, things that come and go where you're like, oh man, I have this weird shoulder thing and it's just this week and, I'm going to work it out, whatever. But when we talk about chronic things, I'm always in pain in my lower back. I'm always having trap issues. It's almost like everybody knows their Achilles heel, right? Like the one part of your body that kind of is like the weak spot, and you're going to have these like nagging things whenever you start working out again or whenever you start doing X, Y, or Z. So if we can talk about those kind of nagging ones for a second in the exact same way, I think it will really help a lot of people understand. So people have lower back pain. Let's use a really, really common one, because that is,
Yes.
I don't even know the percentage of people that report having lower back pain, but it's a lot. People have lower back pain and they want to massage their lower back. They want to put heat on their lower back. They want to, everything is centered around where the pain actually is, where they're feeling it, where the pain signal is being sent. In actuality, though, if that is chronic for you, it is far more likely that you have an issue in an opposing muscle group. So where a lot of people don't look is that lower back pain can often be attributed to tight hip flexors. So because we're sitting all day and we're like collapsed, right? The hip flexors are always collapsed. They're never really getting up to lengthen or to strengthen. And that leaves a lot of people in a situation where they have a muscle imbalance. Their low back is far stronger than their hip flexors. And that puts them in a position where their low back is taking all of the stress because their hip flexors are out to lunch. They're not strong. They're shortened. And so they are just like on a vacation, a perpetual vacation. They're just cheersing champagne and they're never doing any work. And the low back is taking all of it. And people say, my low back is weak and that's why I'm feeling pain there. That's actually probably not true at all. Your low back is probably way stronger than a lot of other people's. It's actually the opposing muscle group that's causing you the problem.
Yeah, I think that's a great point for people who are sitting a lot of the time, because that is 90% of the society that we live in, where we have shortened hip flexors and we are sitting on our ass all the time. So then our glute muscles are becoming just kind of flattened and not turned on as much. And then I always go to everything around. So then you go to your upper back. Most people, when they're sitting down, are sitting, their upper back is rounded, and then you look at where your lower back is. Okay, so now you have shortened hip flexors, your upper back is not doing any work, and everything is on your lower back. So and how long you sitting, like throughout the day, like add up all of those hours, like how long we're sitting. It's a tremendous amount of time, and not surprising that a lot of people have lower back issues. When it comes to something like knee pain, it's very, very similar, because if you have muscle imbalances in your leg, let's just go like super broad in your leg. So what does that mean? Maybe your quads are overactive and your hamstrings are underdeveloped. So what will happen when that, because I know this. So your quads are activating all the time, so they are shortening, and your hamstrings are not turning on. So when it comes to pain surrounding your knee, you're putting a lot of pressure on your knee, and actually you're just starting to pull at the muscles around your knee. Your quad is starting to pull at the muscles around your knee. So like these are all, what I like to remind people is these are all very common, and they're all very normal. And it's very normal to have overactive muscle groups. Many of us do. Based on our anatomy, we just have some muscles that fire faster that we are used to. I know for Rachel, she always talks about her traps, because like just from her body, her traps are more likely to be the first ones to turn on when it comes to anything that she's doing with her shoulders. Like her traps are like, who, me? What are you doing with your shoulders? You called?
You rang?
And for me, like my quads immediately, like you asked me to do anything with my legs. I was at the physical therapist, and he asked me to flex my glute muscles. I was laying on my back. He said, flex your glute muscles. I flexed my quad. It's not that I don't know where my glutes are. That wasn't the problem. My immediate reaction to ask me to flex something in my leg is to flex my quad.
Just like we have our Achilles heel, where we're like, oh, this is like the muscle group that's always acting up or always giving me, anxiety or whatever, or pain. We also have that go-to muscle group that turns on when like nobody was talking to you.
Nobody asked you
Who
quads.
asked you quads? I was asking my glutes, and you showed up like you're here for the party. And yes, you're exactly right. I have constant issues in my lats, and that is not because my lats are like, always showing up to the party and just so extra. It's because my traps are always like this. I oftentimes throughout the day, I find myself like with my traps to my ears, and I'm like, what are you doing? Calm it down. Roll it back and down. Roll it back and down. And that is one of those things where once you kind of figure out what your go-to muscle group is, what is always being called on, where you're overcompensating with that muscle group to mask other ones, then you can start the corrective work where you say like, all right, I'm aware of this. So when I'm sitting in my chair, I'm going to flex my glutes a couple times, because I know that most likely I'm just using my quads the whole entire time to sit here for stability. Or, when I'm working on my computer or phone, I'm going to several times remind myself to roll my shoulders back and down and turn on my lats, because I know that repeated non-use of that muscle group will lead it to start being in pain and hurting. So, not only can you sort of start diagnosing your pain once you kind of understand these concepts, and you're not constantly digging at the muscle that hurts, but instead you're looking at the opposite muscle groups, then you can also start doing preventative work, which I know for you, and me both, having fitness for such a long time and having such longevity, it's like there are the constant need for accessory work in those area. Like, come on,
It's
lats. Like, are
honestly,
you there?
are you there?
Hello.
It's honestly something that I really love about fitness and just getting in touch with your body is that you start to realize these things and you start to feel it out and become so in tune with how your body is feeling that you that almost like these things seem like major, they like seem so big, right? You find an imbalance, you're like, whoa, this is massive. But really it's very, very normal. And once you start addressing the problem, it's an ongoing thing. So I mean, like it's amazing to me because we tend to talk about fitness as if it has some type of destination, and we know it doesn't. If you've listened to this podcast before, it never has a destination. It has the ebbs and flows of your life, and how how important it is, or what phase that you are in your life. But something that I know for me is that. I'm constantly addressing where I feel these imbalances are and programming them in every day. So every day before I work out, I know that I'm doing some kind of glute and hamstring activation no matter what. So not only am I focusing some stretching or maybe some like getting my quads to just like relax a little bit because
Chill.
they're shortened,
Chill,
right?
girls.
Chill. But I'm also on the other end of that, I'm making sure before every training session, my glutes are turned on. And what does that look like? That looks like glute bridges all the damn time. I do monster walks a lot because like I need that like external rotation just to get those muscles like firing, warmed up. For my upper body, I know I'm doing banded pull aparts because like my lats are not the first thing to turn on for my back, right? Like I'll immediately go to more chest and more traps engagement, and those are like ready to fire. But if I don't warm up the other muscle groups, they're not going to turn on. They're not
Well,
ready to go.
here's
You
what I
got
want
to
to
poke
say.
them.
Exactly. And here's what I want to say about accessory work is that the reason why we do it oftentimes in the warm up or
Mm,
as accessory and we're doing it slow and we're working it eccentrically, the reason for that is because your knee jerk reaction is not to use that muscle group, right? So
mm,
it's actually going to take a really lot of concentration to use it. It's almost like going against your general nature to use that muscle group. So we don't want to do it in a situation where we're for time or we're going hard in a workout where we're kind of like we're sweating, we're out of breath, we're forgetting things. When we want to do that work is like right first thing in the warm up when you're like all the way there, you're all the way tuned in and you are working at a pace which allows you to remember to turn on that muscle group and really like focus on it because it's true. It takes a freaking lot of work to like bring the hamstrings to the party, and you don't want to do that under circumstances where you're under duress because it's not likely to happen.
mm-hmm. Because then once you get to the bottom of the squat, right, like that is where like that's where your body is like, we are fight or flight. And when you're in fight or flight, you're going to go with your strongest. So you're going to start
Totally.
to like dip forward, quads turn on. Now you're a little bit forward because your anterior chain is like way more active than your posterior chain. And then we're dipping forward, we're catching a little bit forward, and then we're not in an ideal position. And 100% normal. But when we start to counteract that, you start to see the capabilities and how strong you can be when you start to bring a whole bunch of muscles to the party. When you start to get everyone involved, then we start to see where some real progress can be made. Something I wanted to talk about with strengthening too when we talk about the lower back. And I know we've said this before, but your core. We know it. We know it, guys. We talk about it all the time. But if we are not having an active, strong core, you're putting a lot of strain on your lower back.
I found this out so the hard way. And this was my other major realization. Of course, I always, when I was working on, muscles that were bothering me, and I was with my massage therapist and we were going to opposite muscle groups, I was like, wow, that's really how that works. But it isn't until you have really truly chronic pain. And I remember being newly postpartum from an emergency C-section and having a tremendous amount of lower back pain. I couldn't figure it out. I went to a million specialists. I had a million MRIs. I had a million, I was doing everything, and people were coming up with these wild diagnoses of, things that I had never had this kind of pain. And I kept saying to everybody, I'm very recently postpartum. Do you think that has anything to do with it? And everyone I saw was like, listen, C-sections are no big deal. Just go back to your life. And that's another episode.
That's a whole nother episode where I lose my shit.
Really, what was going on, and I had no idea, was I had an extreme case of diastasis, which my ab muscles were completely separated from each other and had not healed back correctly. Because my core was so weak, my lower back was taking every single bit of the burden, and it was putting a tremendous amount of strain on it. And it was not till I addressed my pelvic floor issues and my diastasis through physical therapy, which I will mention, nobody even touched my back. I never did any work on my back. I didn't stretch. I wasn't doing stretches on my back. I wasn't doing strengthening things on my back. That's not actually what I needed. I needed to correct the issues that were in my core. And lo and behold, after a round of pelvic floor PT, my back stopped hurting. And this was the kind of pain where I couldn't pick up my 6-month-old baby. I couldn't walk around the house without being in pain. This was extreme pain. This was not just, in lifting. So, I just think that it's so hard, because if I had really truly that knowledge to look at the opposite as the problem area for weakness, I wouldn't have had a year of being in pain. And it's frustrating. But I want to also give a couple of examples of common imbalances and how they present themselves and the way they look, just so people that are listening can kind of think about oh yeah, that's me. Quad dominance will often look like, if you're just looking at it from a bird's eye view, it will often look like if you're leaning forward or coming onto your toes in a squat. That is a very good indicator that you might be quad dominant. And that can be for a number of reasons. It could be lack of flexibility in your ankles, and that's why you're shifting it onto your quads. Your quads could be your thing that you go to and that you're always turning on and whatever. But you would highly benefit from, if you're seeing that imbalance where you're shifting forward in your squat, you would highly benefit from some corrective exercises that are posterior chain centered. So all the ones that Kelsea has to do before every workout, step ups, glute bridges, monster walks. Those are all things that are going to benefit you if you're seeing that particular imbalance. Another common one, again, is you see this too, because if you're watching yourself in lifts, you're like, why am I traps? Where are you guys going? Where are you headed? You're headed to the sky. That is a common lat imbalance. So, shoulders that are constantly pulling towards ears, you can, in all of your lifts, you can probably assume that you have some weakness in your lats, because your lats are what pulls it down, right? So that it's in the right position. So you might benefit from things and this is really important, when you're doing face pulls, turn down the traps.
So we see, I like this one, because we often see this with mom a lot too. So when you're doing corrective exercises like face pulls, and you're like, well, I'm doing my corrective exercises, that's a time where you need to be extremely mindful of what you're doing, because you're correcting something that like immediately wants to turn on, right? So even if you're doing face pulls and you feel your traps are still working, you're not doing the work that we need, that we're looking for, right? So like when you're doing some of these corrective exercises, you need to make sure that that muscle group that you're trying to get to relax, buddy, is turned down, and that the muscle group you're looking for is turned on. So like face pulls, a lot of times I see people, they're doing their face pulls, but their traps are up by their ears. So what I really like to remind them is, you, before you touch the band, set your shoulders back and down, and then look for when you're pulling, that you're pulling, and I want you to put your hand in your back pocket. Feel that. That's your lat. That's when your lat is turned on. So I want you to feel that exact muscle turning on when you're pulling the band towards your face.
That's, one of the most important things about corrective exercises is that if you're not being mindful with your intention behind the corrective exercise, if you're just going through the motions, you are 100% going to turn on the muscle group that you didn't want to, because it's the overactive one. And when you turn off your mind, it's the first one to go on. It shows up no matter what. So it's got to be really mindful. That's so important, because like I see people that are prescribed these corrective exercises and they're just like out to lunch while they're doing it. Yeah. And it's just not doing the work that you want to be doing. You're just going through the motions, right? And another really common one that I want to address, and we see this in mom as well, and I think that this is a combination of that happens to people that are aging. And I also think it happens to people that are hunched over all day, which is all of us, over our phones or over our computers, which is a rounded upper back. And when we see this in the gym, we all know to call attention to it, right? Like, oh, you got a rounded upper back in your deadlift. That's terrible. Or, you're in the bottom of your squat and you get a rounded upper back. Everybody can kind of pick it out. But where that imbalance is just overactive pecs and underactive lats again. So we need to be addressing that through corrective exercise. It's not necessarily something that you're going to be able to just like, I know I shouldn't be rounding my back during a lift, so I just won't. Like, there's a reason why you're going to that, and it's because a muscle is underdeveloped. So corrective work is definitely the way to correct that and not have that imbalance anymore.
Yeah, so some of the things that like are sometimes mildly frustrating when we talk about a rounded upper back is that a lot of our correction from our trainers or whatever is just like chest forward. And not that that's not a great cue for a lot of people, but we have to look at why someone is rounding their upper back, and if they have the ability to bring their chest forward to flatten out their back. Something else I want to add with that is that anatomy plays a massive difference in how this is going to look for every person. So you might see someone lifting online and say like, whoa, they have a rounded back. That might be rounded for you, but that might be a perfectly safe position for them, because like with their anatomy, they have a certain amount of round, which is fine for them, a certain amount of rounded upper back, which is fine for them. This is very different for every person and can look very different. Like every lifter is not, or every person doing like any of these exercises is not going to look the same. Your anatomy is different. A good looking squat looks different on every single person. Okay. This is something we've had to like fight with the internet about. It's going to look very different based on someone's anatomy. It doesn't mean that like no matter what, like any little rounding is a bad thing. No, it's not. But we do need to look at when you have someone who has that like that rounding where you're just kind of like, no, your lats are just not pulling on. You're not pulling back, and you're putting too much strain on your upper back. And like she said, this is very common with people who are aging, and it's honestly very common with older men as well. Men tend to, in their younger years, have just benched. They just benched so much. They benched like every day, all in high school, all the weight. And then their chest is very, very strong, but their back is just not. It's not. So anytime you see them go to push for anything, they're doing anything overhead. You can see men do this all the time. They're pulling something overhead. They push the bar out, and then they use their chest to push it up. Oops, sorry, I hit my mic. They use their chest to push it up, and you're like, okay, that makes sense because your chest is a lot stronger than your back, and your mobility is going to allow you to do that. But you see the same thing with their mobility, is that they can't bring their elbows all the way forward because they lack that rotation in their shoulder because some of their muscle groups are completely imbalanced. So we look at that when it comes to an imbalance, a muscle imbalance, and a mobility issue.
Yeah, and I think those have to work together too. I think
Yeah.
we need to remember that those two things work together. When you're working corrective exercises, you definitely want to be focused on the muscle group that is quote unquote weaker or not turning on or not activating, but you also want to be focused on the active muscle group and making sure that it stays lengthened. So like if you're saying like, okay, I really have a rounded back in a lot of things I do, there could be two reasons behind that, and most likely it's a combination of both: underdeveloped lats and overdeveloped pecs that are pulling too tight. So when we're correcting that, we want to be working on opening up and lengthening the pecs. That can be done through mobility. And then we also want to work on strengthening the lats, which can be done through corrective exercise. So it really is a full package that you need to be working on. Like I know for you, yes, of course, you said like, of course I'm turning on my posterior chain and doing all kinds of corrective work in my warm up, but I'm also making sure that my quads are calmed down and lengthened and long and open and stretched, because without that, there's going to be pulling in the wrong direction, and one is going to be shortened and one is going to be lengthened, and that isn't the perfect kind of homeostasis that we want. I'm back to my clamshell. Did you see it came back?
Yeah.
I got my clamshell.
Homeostasis.
This is how it works, okay? It goes right, and if one is like this, then it's going to sit like this instead of, being that perfect kind of middle. On that, just one last point that I want to make is that we need to normalize imbalances, okay? Because I think people freak out over
what's my imbalances? I gotta stop everything and correct them. Like, whoa, chill.
because it's so normal.
Yeah.
People get so weird about like, well, my left arm is not as strong as my right arm. Well, yeah, you have a dominant side. Like that's totally normal. You don't need to stop everything, get them exactly equal, and then continue on. Like it is complete. I know you were saying before this episode, like you stand on one leg more than the other. Like when you're just standing up, you lean to one side. Like it's very natural when you're standing up a front squat that you will see a lean to the strong side. And you don't need to stop front squatting just because that's happening. Muscle imbalances are normal. They are common. I don't know a single person without an imbalance. But again,
I mean, we accept it in every other aspect of our life, right? We accept that we have a dominant side. We accept that, some things that we do are stronger. We have stronger aspects of everything else we do, stronger aspects of our personality, like our muscles. Like we have strong, like we're always thriving to have some balance and notice these things, but you're going to be stronger in some ways. That doesn't mean that everything needs to stop, but it does mean that we look at those things and we work to bring them closer together.
Well, yeah. I mean, you can have a couple beers, right? But there's a certain amount that's going to put you over the edge, right? So there is a certain amount of imbalance that is totally fine and natural. It's just going to be towards the end of the night. Did you do enough things to keep that, a fun night, or are you puking in the toilet? So that's really, I think the balance that it's all about balance.
It's all about balance. We're trying, right? We're trying for balance. As long as we keep talking about it, we keep talking about it, we keep working towards it. So you have some things that you can take with you from this episode into your training sessions. I also wanted to add that, if you have a training session where you have a ton of pushing, at the end of that session, you should be doing some pulling to counteract that. It's a very important part of training, and it's not something that we always think about. If you follow TTSL, we do that for you, so you don't have to think about it. So that's programmed for you, but that's always why we say you should not be programming for yourself. I always just like come right out and say that, because you leave that to a professional like you do with everything else. But when you have someone who's thinking of this for you, they know that if you have a ton of pushing, we're gonna make sure that you are also pulling, so that when you leave the gym, you're not leaving with more imbalance than you came out with. They're leaving as a stronger, healthier, happier human. Go do TTSL. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode and have an amazing week. We love you.
Love you.